The Holocaust. In the annals of history, some pages are so dark they defy comprehension. The Holocaust, which saw the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews and countless others, remains an indelible mark on human conscience. But who were the individuals who suffered, and what led humanity down this terrible path? Today, we delve into the events, the people, and the aftermath of the Holocaust. This is an episode of remembrance, of education, and of caution for the future. To comprehend the incomprehensible, one must first wade through the dark tides that led up to it. A vital part of understanding this devastation is knowing the environment from which it sprang. Germany, following its defeat in World War I, was a nation battered, humiliated, and economically crippled. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh reparations, leaving the German people disgruntled and desperate for change. Enter Adolf Hitler and the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party, who managed to channel this national anger and humiliation into a dangerous ideology. Adolf Hitler, the man at the epicenter of this storm, began as an Austrian-born soldier, fighting for Germany in World War I. Later, he ventured into politics, quickly rising through the ranks with his charismatic speeches and promises to restore German pride. His open disdain for Jews was not a secret, it was a cornerstone of his ideological construct, as published in his manifesto, Mein Kampf. As the Nazi Party gained power, anti-Semitic rhetoric turned into policy. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935 stripped German Jews of their citizenship and prohibited them from marrying or having sexual relations with non-Jews. The atmosphere grew increasingly hostile, reaching a violent climax in the form of Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, in 1938. Synagogues were burned, Jewish businesses were vandalized, and thousands of Jews were arrested. Before the final solution was ever formalized, early concentration camps like Dachau had already been set up, initially for political opponents but increasingly used to detain Jews. Ghettos were established in cities to segregate Jewish populations, trapping them in squalid conditions. All of these were stepping stones to what would later become a meticulously organized extermination plan. The stage was further set as Germany began to annex territories. Austria, the Sudetenland, and eventually all of Czechoslovakia fell under Nazi rule. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact between Germany and the Soviet Union in 1939 signaled a non-aggression treaty that set the stage for the invasion of Poland. Once World War II broke out, the map of Europe increasingly came under swastika flags, and more Jews fell under Nazi jurisdiction. The fuse was lit, and the world plunged into the Second Great War within a generation. But even as armies clashed on multiple fronts, behind the scenes, another war was being waged. A war against innocent men, women, and children who had no armies to defend them, who had committed no crime other than being born into a faith deemed undesirable by a hateful ideology. The stage was set, the actors in place, and the world remained largely oblivious to what would become one of the most horrific chapters in human history. From the confines of secret meetings and dark ambitions, the final solution to the Jewish question was soon to be unleashed, burying humanity beneath an avalanche of sorrow and disgrace. Behind closed doors on January 20, 1942, in a villa at Wannsee, a suburb of Berlin, a group of high-ranking Nazi officials and SS officers gathered to discuss what they called the final solution to the Jewish question. Led by SS Obergruppenführer Reinhard Heydrich, this conference signaled the transition from years of systemic degradation and persecution to an orchestrated plan for the mass extermination of Jews. From this point on, the gears of annihilation were set in motion with ruthless efficiency. Auschwitz, Sobibor, Treblinka, and other extermination camps became the dark theaters where this mass murder would be executed. Unbeknownst to the world, trains packed with Jewish families started arriving at these camps, their passengers hopeful for a new start. Instead, what awaited them was an unthinkable end. Upon arrival, victims underwent a sorting process. Those deemed fit for labor were temporarily spared, greeted by the deceptive phrase Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free. The others, children, the elderly, the sick, were directed almost immediately to gas chambers, the reality of which was often concealed until the very last moment. The method of extermination was chillingly industrial. Zyklon B, a cyanide-based pesticide, was used in gas chambers to kill large numbers of people quickly. Once dead, the bodies were looted for valuables, gold teeth were extracted, and the remains were incinerated in crematoriums or mass buried in unmarked graves. Those who survived the initial selection were subjected to forced labor under brutal conditions. Many worked in armament factories or on other war-related projects. Malnourishment, disease, and random acts of cruelty claimed lives daily. To add to the horror, some prisoners became subjects of ghastly medical experiments. Doctors like Joseph Mengele conducted tests that had no scientific merit and were designed only to dehumanize and torture. It's crucial to understand that this wasn't confined to Germany. Camps were spread throughout Nazi-occupied Europe. Collaborationist regimes and individuals in various countries also participated in the rounding up of Jews and other minorities. Despite the unimaginable circumstances, stories of resistance and resilience emerged. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising of 1943 stands as a testament to the indomitable human spirit, even in the face of almost certain death. The magnitude of the horror began to unfold before the world's eyes as Allied forces liberated the camps, one by one, revealing the scale of the Nazi atrocities. Skeletal survivors and piles of bodies were a shocking testament to the industrialized mass murder that had been conducted. From planning to execution, the final solution was an exercise in calculated barbarity. It stands as an enduring example of the depths to which human cruelty can plunge when guided by hate and ideology. Understanding its mechanics is a solemn duty, one that obliges us to say, never again. While the Holocaust is primarily associated with the extermination of 6 million Jews, it's crucial to recognize that the Nazis' hate did not discriminate solely based on religion. Romani people, disabled individuals, Poles, Slavs, communists, Jehovah's Witnesses, and homosexuals were also targeted in this widespread tragedy of humanity. Let's begin with one of the earliest, lesser-known Nazi extermination programs. The Action T4 program. Designed as a euthanasia mission, this program targeted individuals with mental and physical disabilities. Approximately 300,000 disabled people were killed under the guise of mercy deaths, often experimented upon before their lives were tragically cut short. The Romani people faced a genocide, or parachmos, that is estimated to have claimed up to 500,000 lives. Separated from other prisoners in so-called gypsy family camps, they were subjected to cruel medical experiments, forced sterilizations, and mass killings. Homosexual men, identified by a pink triangle sewn onto their prison uniforms, were another group persecuted under the Third Reich. Estimates suggest that 5,000 to 15,000 gay men were detained in concentration camps, where they faced brutal conditions, including sexual abuse and cruel medical experiments. Political dissidents, including communists, social democrats, and trade unionists, were among the earliest inmates of concentration camps like Dachau. Their struggle, often overlooked, embodies the broad sweep of Nazi terror that aimed to annihilate all forms of opposition. Even amidst such dire circumstances, there were glimmers of resistance. Armed and unarmed resistance movements existed, often led by political prisoners and occasionally joined by disenchanted soldiers and officers. Acts of sabotage, the smuggling of information, and even armed uprisings were part of this lesser-known side of the Holocaust. Within the camps themselves, quiet acts of defiance were also present. From the orchestration of small escapes to the surreptitious practice of religious rituals, these instances highlight the human yearning for freedom and dignity even in the most oppressive conditions. It would be incomplete to discuss resistance without acknowledging the non-Jewish individuals and groups who risked everything to oppose the Nazi regime. The White Rose movement, led by university students in Munich, distributed anti-Nazi leaflets and were ultimately executed for their resistance. Jan Karski, a Polish diplomat, smuggled evidence of the Holocaust to the Allied powers, desperately advocating for intervention. The Holocaust was a tapestry of human suffering, woven with threads of hatred but also of resistance and resilience. The stories of the lesser-known victims and heroes add further complexity to our understanding of this dark chapter, reminding us that it wasn't just a crime against a single group but a crime against humanity itself. When the Allied forces liberated the concentration and extermination camps, the world was confronted with a reality so horrific it defied comprehension. Survivors, many of whom were mere skeletons, faced the monumental task of rebuilding lives shattered by unfathomable trauma. But beyond personal healing, there was a collective yearning for justice. This was the genesis of the post-war legal reckoning. The most famous of these legal proceedings were the Nuremberg trials, which began in November 1945. Senior Nazi officials, industrialists, and military officers were tried for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. 12 were sentenced to death, 3 were acquitted, and the rest received various other sentences. It was here that the legal term, genocide, was first used and defined. Yet, Nuremberg was just the beginning. Many escaped justice, scattering across the globe under assumed identities. One such figure was Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the final solution. Captured by Mossad agents in Argentina, he was brought to Israel and tried in 1961. His execution was a grimly cathartic moment for many survivors. Then came the Frankfurt Auschwitz trials from 1963 to 1965, which focused on the individuals who operated the death machinery at Auschwitz. Simon Wiesenthal, a survivor of multiple concentration camps, devoted his life to tracking down war criminals. His tireless efforts brought more than 1,000 Nazi war criminals to justice and inspired a global commitment to never forget. The pursuit of justice paralleled the endeavor to educate. Holocaust memorials and museums have sprouted around the globe, serving as solemn reminders of the horrors of unchecked power and prejudice. School curriculums now often include Holocaust studies, aiming to instill in future generations the imperative of vigilance and the courage to stand against hatred. The Holocaust also profoundly impacted international law. The principles established at Nuremberg have been invoked in subsequent international trials, setting legal precedents for prosecuting war crimes and crimes against humanity. This legacy ensures that the quest for justice, although born from the darkest of epochs, endures as a beacon guiding our collective moral compass. In reckoning with the aftermath of the Holocaust, humanity faced unanswerable questions about the depths of its own darkness and the heights of its capacity for justice. While we can never restore the millions of lives lost, the subsequent actions taken in legal arenas and educational initiatives stand as enduring testimonies to a collective promise: never again. It's a disheartening but undeniable reality that the Holocaust, a tragedy beyond comprehension, has been subjected to misinformation, conspiracy theories, and even outright denial. Such narratives are not just morally repugnant but also dangerous, as they distort historical truth and perpetuate antisemitism. Holocaust denial is not a new phenomenon. Immediately post-war, there were those who claimed the mass exterminations were Allied propaganda. Today, this form of denial has found a haven on the internet, masquerading under the guise of academic debate or alternative history. It's a form of hate speech that has seen a resurgence in the age of social media, where misinformation can spread like wildfire. Many conspiracy theories employ selective or manipulated evidence, often using decontextualized photographs, forged documents, or distorted statistics. This approach aims to sow doubt about established facts, thereby undermining the gravity of the Holocaust. However, such theories are universally discredited by reputable historians, and numerous authoritative sources have been provided to counter these false narratives. Another dark tangent is the resurfacing of age-old anti-Semitic conspiracies in discussions around the Holocaust. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a fraudulent text that predates the Holocaust, has sometimes been invoked to suggest a Jewish conspiracy, despite being thoroughly discredited as a hoax. Though it may seem counterintuitive to give attention to such damaging theories, it's crucial to actively and categorically refute them. Many organizations and individuals have dedicated themselves to debunking these myths, driven by the conviction that silence can be mistaken for acquiescence. Legally, many countries have passed laws that criminalize Holocaust denial as a form of hate speech, recognizing the inherent danger in allowing such beliefs to propagate unchecked. While this approach has sparked debates about freedom of speech, there's an increasing global consensus that Holocaust denial is a form of violence, aimed not just at the memory of the victims but at the dignity of those who survived and their descendants. In the end, the persistent existence of Holocaust denial and conspiracy theories serves as a grim reminder of the ongoing struggle against ignorance and hate. By being vigilant in our pursuit of truth, we honor those who perished and arm ourselves against the recurrence of such atrocities. The Holocaust serves as a grim reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink when prejudice and hatred go unchecked. As we remember the victims, let's also ensure their stories are passed on to future generations, for it's in remembrance that we find our safeguard against repetition. Thank you for joining us for this solemn and necessary episode of Chronicles. We hope you'll be with us for our next episode as we continue to explore the defining moments and figures of history. Our journey through the corridors of time is far from over.